Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am excited, so excited. This is our first show this year, and we are having two very important guests tonight, and I'm honored to be in your presence. Steve Murley, our school superintendent, and Kate Moreland, our community relation officer. Of course, you have a different name better than that, but it is really wonderful that you begin the year by talking to our community. And as a matter of fact, I have been preparing a lot of questions. And we have about, let's say, half an hour. But these are the questions in this. So, no, I'm just joking. Steve, I would like you to tell our audience a little bit information about you, who you are, and we are so proud to have you here as our leader in the education service.
Thank you, Hani. And it's a pleasure to be interviewed by someone who has a connection and a history with the school district. So thank you for inviting us on. I come to Iowa City now measuring my time in years. This is my second year in the district. Prior to that, I spent 17 years in Wisconsin. And prior to that, I was in Michigan. In Wisconsin, I worked in 3 different school districts. The last district I served in was the Wausau School District, which is midway between Minneapolis and Green Bay. It has snow right now. We don't. And it's one of the wonderful things about being in Iowa City. Prior to my time in education, I spent time working in city and county government, and I am blessed to have a Big Ten background. We had to have some discussion about that when I went through the interview process, because I've got an undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan and a graduate degree from the University of Wisconsin. But that seemed to be no barrier when we went through the interview process. So hopefully that keeps it all in the Big Ten family. Very, very pleased to be here. I tell people that I moved to Iowa City not only for the professional opportunities in the school district, the opportunity to lead a growing school district that has a reputation both in the state and outside the state for high quality, but also a personal decision. I have 2 children who are still in the school district here. One is an elementary student and one is a junior high student. So this is a
What are their names?
Andrew is in junior high and Alec is in elementary school. And it's a wonderful opportunity for me to provide for them an unparalleled educational opportunity here in Iowa City.
And I know that your wife, Darcy, has an experience with at-risk population, and
Yes.
she taught this extensively.
She started out as a special education teacher, and from there she began working with at-risk populations, high school students, and then also had the opportunity to work through the technical college system in Wisconsin, worked with displaced workers seeking GEDs and advanced education.
And your guest tonight.
And I am so pleased to introduce to the community Kate Moreland, who is our Community Relations Coordinator. One of the things that I recognized right away when I came into the district was that we are a large, complex organization. We have 19 elementary schools, we have 6 secondary schools, 3 junior high schools, and 3 high schools. And it's very difficult for people inside the system to have a good grasp of the things that go on throughout our school district. It's even harder for those outside the school district to really have a full understanding of the things that we do on a day-in, day-out basis in education. At the time that I came in, we didn't have anybody who was exclusively dedicated to communications. We do now, and it's a wonderful benefit for us, both internally and externally. She certainly helps facilitate communications among staff, and then she helps tell the good stories of the things that we do in the Iowa City Community School District.
So let us hear some of these stories.
Some of the stories.
Yeah, talk to our audience about what has been achieved during the last year.
Well, I've been with the district since January, but I've lived in the community since I came in 1994. And starting this job in January, I've really come to appreciate in my position all the wonderful things that staff and teachers do on a daily basis. I get invited to a lot of events that I can then let the press know about, both in the classroom, extracurricular events. And there's so many great success stories that happen every day, some big and some small, but all very important. And so it's been an honor to follow those stories and be able to then share them with the public when something exciting happens. There's so many different communication tools now, and so part of my role has been to try to get those set up so that we have the avenues there to share. People get their information so quickly and in so many different ways. So yes, there's so many great stories that are out there.
As a matter of fact, we were in desperate need for such a position, because we have always had good superintendents here. But unfortunately, with your predecessors before, the link between the headquarters of education and the community was somehow lacking. And there was a missed chance to convey all the achievements and all the successes to the community. There were some confusions, and eventually it ended up by having kind of wrong judgment about the personality of the leadership. So I think it's now, it's getting better now. Is that one of the reasons that you changed the name of your headquarters, by the way?
We did. We recently moved into the new Educational Services Center, and it was formerly called the Central Administrative Office. And when we made that move, several departments that were not housed within our department came together. So we have many now of our departments under that roof. And staff was solicited for ideas about the name, and we all voted, and that was the selection that won. And it really conveys the message that we are there to serve the community and the school, be the connection between the community and the school district, so that they feel comfortable coming in the door, and we have our services under one roof for the most part. And we are really there to serve the community and its students.
And if we go back a couple of months and try to look at your achievements, what are the highlights? Of course, I'm not expecting you to say everything, but at least one or two things that you think they are the most important.
Well, we're obviously a growing district, which I think is positive in this time, and especially in Iowa, to be a growing district, growing beyond what we even thought we were going to grow beyond, which presents its own challenges. But it's positive to be a growing district. We obviously always fare very well when it comes to the ACT, both high schools, higher than both the state and national average for our ACT scores. I've been amazed, even being in the community, at how accomplished our music and our arts and our athletics are year after year. I mean, we're both academically and then extracurricularly just a very, very strong school district. Sometimes I think we get kind of used to that, but it really is something to be celebrated.
And now we have a new school building.
We have a new school this year, or one that opened last fall, Garner Elementary in North Liberty, and then we'll have the elementary school Norman Borlaug Elementary, that will open next fall. So another reason, because we're growing, to be opening new schools and new opportunities for our students to have new facilities.
One of the things that just jumped into my mind. A lot of people say when I interview people, I sit before the production meeting and say, well, let's talk about this and that. But suddenly when you sit in the studio, things come to your mind. And I have observed that, Steve, you hired a lot of young leaders in schools, mostly females. And that was really a remarkable achievement, I think. As an observer, a community member and a parent, to see that, usually females in our education system were the classroom teachers. But when it comes to leadership, it was always the good old boys, club. And now we have a lot of leaders, and most of them are young What's behind this philosophy?
Well, if you talk to Jim Peterson, who's our recently announced retiring Human Resources Director, one of the things that Jim will point out is that it wasn't that long ago that we had a very male-dominated administrative staff, in particular because of the number of men who were elementary school principals. And since the time that we had that level of balance, we worked hard as a district prior to my arrival and then after my arrival to make sure that we do two things. One is we seek the best possible candidates, and then the other thing that we do is we try to make sure that to the extent we can, the people that either teach for us or they're administrators for us reflect the population. And so we'll try to make sure that we've got a good gender balance, that we've got good balances in terms of ethnic minorities in our teaching staff and our administrative staff. So that's always a goal that we have. Jim will point out that we went, in some sense, the pendulum swung from one side to the other. We went from a very male-dominated elementary principal staff in particular to a very female-dominated elementary principal staff. And every once in a while, I'll have people tell me, well, maybe you should look for more this or that. In the case of elementary principals, perhaps we should look for more male elementary principals. My response is always the same. We want the best principals we can find. And if it happens as it does right now, that we have a very female-dominated staff, they are the best principals that we could find. And we are wonderfully blessed because Iowa City is a destination for administrators throughout Iowa that, and outside the state, that we get wonderfully qualified candidates applying for all of our vacancies, teaching and administrative. And so we really do get to pick some of the best and brightest to come here to Iowa City.
Thank you. I think we need more probably male classroom teachers, especially at the elementary level. I mean, I wish people go into the profession, especially the male part of the educators, you know.
And maybe if I could just respond real quickly to that, because I have the otherist perspective on that, and that is having worked in other school districts prior to coming to Iowa City. And I will tell you, and you may also hear this from others who have moved to Iowa City, that Iowa City is actually blessed in terms of the number of elementary principals who are male. Most school districts struggle with that far more than we do here. And if you walk into any of our elementary schools, you're going to find male teachers. And they're not just at the 6th grade level. They're also teaching kindergarten, teaching first grade, teaching second grade. And that provides a wonderful role model for the boys in the classroom, just as having many female teachers in the district provides that opportunity for the elementary girls.
I was so impressed when I met you the first day when you started working here. And you stopped me to ask me questions. And I was amazed that you gave me all the time to and listen to me. Everybody was in line trying to shake hands with you, and you were trying to get some information from everyone. And I remember after that, maybe a few days later, I interviewed you for the Press Citizen. And the title of my article was "Optimistic about the future of our education, public education system," which you decided to use as a title of our show tonight. Steve, as I told you, I collected all these questions, but I cannot, within 20 minutes, ask you everything. I am going to try to highlight some of them. And you have already alluded to some important points here. Minority hiring. And if you can give me a little bit background on this, because I realize that the teachers in the district here, we have 904 teachers. Only 36 of them are minority. And you hope to raise this 4% up to 6 or more.
Yes.
How are you going to do this?
Well, and it also, interestingly enough, that's the same percentage we have with our administrative team. 4% of our administrative team are minority administrators. And that also is a category that we would like to see increase. And one of the things, again, if you talk to Jim in HR, one of the things that he'll talk about is that as we go about the hiring process, it's important to know who your market is and we certainly attract Iowa educators. We also know that there are several other Midwestern states that also feed educators into our system. We recently have hired a couple of administrators who came from the western part of the state, one in Nebraska, in the southern part of Nebraska, and one in the northern part of Nebraska. So we know that we also attract candidates from other Midwestern states, and so we target our recruiting in those states that look a lot like Iowa, because we know that when people come here, they will be comfortable with the Midwest and in a Midwest community, in particular a Midwest college community. Because one of the things that we know is important is not only attracting minority candidates to apply, then selecting the best candidates among that pool, and then for those minority candidates who make it through that process, we want to make sure that we retain them. One of the things that the school district does is spend an inordinate amount of time, energy, and effort making sure that those people that come to us as teachers and administrators have excellent professional development opportunities so they can grow their capacities as teachers or administrators. And once they've come here, we want to make sure that they stay.
Sure.
And so retention is a big part of that for us. We are very fortunate that we have such a wonderful town to live in. Iowa City is a wonderful community. It's very open and welcoming. It has a breadth of cultural opportunities. So regardless of where you come from or what your background is, there's an opportunity for you to find a home here. And I think that makes it easier for us to recruit minority candidates. I would say, though, that across the Midwest, there are fewer and fewer minority candidates for us to recruit. And we are not the only district that is seeking to diversify our teaching pool, and so there's quite a bit of competition for high-quality minority candidates.
I will move on to the blueprint, this big issue that has to do with federal as well as the local philosophy, mainly local, I think. But there are some concerns among people. And I did, in the production meeting, talk to you about this, and he said, please give me everything you have. And you're ready to address all these controversial issues.
I'll give it a shot.
I know that you have this stamina to do that. But some of them are difficult to answer. And if I were in your shoes, I probably would say, I don't know, how can I do this? But let us see how Steve Murley is going to do this. Now, the class size, we know that is going to be increasing.
One of the things
how this is going to be dealt with under this blueprint?
One of the things that the blueprint talks about is essentially reallocating resources. And several weeks ago, Jason Glass, the Director of Education for the state, was here in Iowa City, and at Iowa City West High School, he was part of a forum. And in the forum, he was asked by several members of our staff and community how they thought we would deal with some of the changes that were proposed in the blueprint. And one of the things that he talked about was the fact that they foresaw class sizes increasing incrementally over time as they seek to redistribute resources within the system. And we've already seen that to some degree here in Iowa City, partially because of the 0% allowable growth that we had last year. That afforded us 20 fewer teachers than we normally would have had with a 2% allowable growth. And that made it a little bit tighter for us when we went through our staffing process this year. If you look at the research that's out there, and this was cited by Director Glass and others, you can find both sides of the argument in terms of class size, whether it does or doesn't make a difference. One thing that we do know, though, and we've had these conversations with our staff here in the district, I was just out in a building today in a third grade classroom that has 34 students in it.
I have a daughter at home school, and she was excited to say, and I said hi to him, and he waved back to me.
Sure
and
did. I saw her in
wow.
the hallway. I saw her in the hallway walking through. But in the third grade classroom I was in, it was at Penn Elementary today, and they have 34 students in there. And in working with the teacher in the classroom while we were doing science, it's very problematic to actually go through the science curriculum the way that's set up when you have 34 kids. We were talking about the fact that the unit was on simple tools in science, and the kids were using pulleys and they were using levers, and part of the unit would also require them to use hammers, and we were talking about how safe or not it might be to have 34 third graders with hammers in a classroom. And that's just one example of the fact that having that many children in a classroom makes it more difficult to teach. It doesn't necessarily make it more difficult for the students to learn. although it certainly creates an atmosphere in which it's harder for teachers to have one-on-one interaction with students. And we know that that affects the environment in the classroom. It affects the rapport that the teacher builds with the students. And so we want to pay attention when they talk about increasing class size.
Again, there is some concern about the, you mentioned teachers now, and teachers is a big chunk of this blueprint.
Yes.
One of them is this personality test that teachers have to go through before they are accepted. It's controversial because I think someone made a comment in the paper, in the letters to the editor. He said, well, how can we rely on personality tests by people who need personality tests to begin with? So how you think you are going to do that? Because I know that you have an idea that's really very good to implement with Gallup and all that.
One of the things that we look at in the hiring process is having multiple data points. And no one of those data points is necessarily a deciding factor for us. One of the concerns that we have about the personality test is if it is meant to screen candidates in or out of the pool. That is, if you don't pass, however that's defined, if you don't pass the personality test, then you would not be eligible to teach. Certainly knowing the way that those personality screeners run, they'll tell you about strengths that individual candidates have. They'll tell you about areas of concerns that individual candidates have. Those are certainly things that we would like to know about. We're concerned, though, that that might screen people out, that might prevent people from becoming teachers. And we would prefer to have a system in which we have access to that data, but that data does not decide for us as a local school district whether we can or cannot hire an individual.
How about the tiered salary system? I know this is again very controversial about the merit pay and all that.
I know that currently they've decided that they won't introduce it in this legislative session.
Okay.
But having had the opportunity to speak about it, one of the things that I talk about is having the opportunity throughout the district, because of the high caliber of the staff in our district, to see master teachers on a regular basis. Many of those master teachers are motivated by their ability to work with children. They want to work with classrooms that's their career. And they aren't interested in leaving the classroom to do other work, whether that work is coaching or mentoring. They see their calling as working with children in the classroom. The way that the system is set up appears to reward teachers for leaving the classroom. And I know that that's something philosophically that I'm uncomfortable with. I certainly have great respect for the people who serve as instructional coaches in our district, for those people who've taken on the role as mentors to work with the numerous new teachers and administrators that we have moving through the district. But I also have an utmost amount of respect for those teachers who have elected to stay in the classroom and have refined their skills and are able to deliver the education that allows us to achieve, to our students to achieve at the level that they do. And I'm concerned that we may undervalue those people who seek that role.
Thank you. Now I would like you to address Roosevelt. I know that a lot of people say, oh, Hani, good that you asked this question. So let us talk to our audience about Roosevelt.
Certainly. Roosevelt Elementary School, one of those things that as I came into the district, Kate mentioned that
yeah, you inherited this.
I inherited that
beautiful,
one because we're moving into Borlaug, which Borlaug will be a great opportunity for those children. We went through the boundary discussion for that last year, and what that left for me to deal with was the disposition of the Roosevelt campus. One of the things, and again, this goes back to Kate's conversation about how you build those bridges with your external populations, in this case the Miller Orchard Neighborhood Group and other neighbors for the Roosevelt property, and actually engage in that kind of dialogue that allows us to better understand what the community wants and needs. I had a conversation with a board member today as we're looking at next steps in Roosevelt, that clearly in the time that I spent with them, I know what they don't want in their neighborhood. They were very clear about that in the study group. And what that does is that hopefully affords us as a school district the opportunity to be a good neighbor to the Roosevelt community, because we still live in the community. This is still our community, and as such we want to make sure we're responsive to the Roosevelt neighborhood groups and to the community as a whole. And then we're also trying to be responsible in terms of our duty, our fiduciary duty to the taxpayers to try to balance those roles, and that's kind of the fine line that we walk there. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we explore opportunities that give, as it was mentioned in the letter to the editor in the paper today, adequate time for interested parties to be able to come forward to explore opportunities to purchase and repurpose Roosevelt. Certainly not something that the school district will do, but as the individual in the paper said today, make sure that there's adequate time for those folks to seek external resources and then look for opportunities.
Steve, is there anything you think you want to talk to our audience about tonight?
One thing that I would like to talk about, I know that public education, and I'll speak directly to the camera, public education has been under siege in some instances throughout the course of the last 2 or 3 years. There are many people that say that public education is failing. I find that disheartening at best, and certainly on a national level, certainly disappointing that people would look at our public schools and see them as failing. If you spend as much time in classrooms, as much time interacting with our staff, seeing the students and the learning that takes place in our classrooms every day, there's no doubt that public education is not failing in Iowa City. Public education is succeeding and exceeding extraordinarily well. Our children achieve at a level that's unparalleled. And for those of you that don't have children in school, I welcome you to come into our schools and to see our children in action.
We are so delighted to have both of you tonight. And you promise me that you're going to come back again.
I will.
And talk to our audience.
I certainly
and,
will.
Maybe next time we'll have some audience to ask you questions on behalf of John Karhoff and Mike Peterson, our producer, our great director, and on behalf of all the community members who are looking forward to working with you, both of you. We thank you very much for the great occasion, and we are so proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me in.